Thank you to all four head of state and head of government. Now we enter into the next phase of discussion, which is questions to the four heads of state. In this sense, I'm representing many of you here who are businessmen. In as much as I'd like to concentrate on the economic side of things, after all, this is the economic forum, economics and business cannot be devoid of the political environment in which we live. And at least two of the four have mentioned already the issue of North Korea. As I look back into the last 1 year, it seems that there is perhaps 3 bombs in the world. One is Brexit, a little over a year ago. The second one is Donald Trump, elected President of the United States. And number 3 is North Korea. I wonder if we can take it in reverse order. First, concerning this matter of North Korea. Obviously, as Prime Minister Abe mentioned, it reminds everyone that nuclear threat is something that may still be with us. President Moon, you are closest to North Korea. You're only 35 miles from the border, the 38th parallel. Let me ask you for some advice. Recently, I met a friend in southern China who is a big real estate developer. He told me that he invests all over China except in northeast China because of the potential danger of nuclear issues in North Korea. On the other hand, for me, I have invested maybe $14 billion in China, all of them basically equity, no debt, and 4 billion of which is in Northeast Asia. So please advise me, President Moon, is my friend correct to not invest there, or am I correct to invest there? Should I worry for my $4 billion US investment in Northeast China, which is very close to North Korea and indeed Vladivostok? Please. No, you can just sit here and push the button, please.
예, 중국 동북부에 잘 투자하셨습니다. 그리고 그에 더한다면
I think that such investments in China are quite positive and proper, and I believe that now is a time to invest in Korea as well. Doubtless, there are tensions and concerns over North Korea all over the region. We feel a special sort of concern because of that issue and to resolve this issue of North Korea. We should act in concert with the international community, and we've been applying and imposing sanctions and exerting pressure, but the final goal of all these measures and steps is a peaceful diplomatic resolution of the conflict, of the crisis, and I'd like to emphasize that. The Korean Peninsula and the macro region will not have a war, I'm certain. This is why now is a proper time to invest in Russia, in the Far East of Russia, in China and Korea as well.
President Moon, you make me feel very good that perhaps my $4 billion US investment in this part of the world is safe. I wonder if any of the other leaders care to comment on this point. President Putin?
Well, you asked the question whether one should worry about this situation and whether one can keep investing there. I would give affirmative answers to both of the questions. Yes, we should have concerns because there are real tensions flaring up, but still one should keep investing at the same time, because if one stops working in the economy of the region, things will deteriorate, not improve. As well as my Korean counterpart, I'm confident that indeed there will be no large-scale conflict or a WMD conflict, no, because all the parties opposing each other will have enough common sense, and they are aware of their responsibility before the people residing in that region will be able to resort to diplomatic means and avenues and do this problem properly. And we discussed this issue with the Japanese Prime Minister, and not long ago, 2 days ago, we had a phone conversation with him, and I believe he sticks to this position as well, that we should find diplomatic ways out. Let me remind you that back in 2005, we virtually agreed all of that. We reached back then agreements that spelled out that the North Korean state assumed obligations to roll back its nuclear and missile program, and all other participants and parties to the talks pledged to support the process and facilitate, and they said there was a need to restore a good friendly relationship between North and South of Korea, and trilateral projects were discussed. They were on the table between Russia and both Koreas, but unfortunately then someone demanded, as I think, something that North Korea hadn't promised, and by and by the situation degraded to the lows where we are today. We should feel concerns, but we should do our best to resolve the issue, and I'm confident we are able to attain positive results.
If any of the other heads of state and head of government would like to jump in, please feel free to do so. I do agree very much with the two presidents who have mentioned that there cannot be a war there, and I do not see how it can happen. With 11,000 cannons of Second World War pointing at Seoul, which is so close, I just don't see how anything could happen. Diplomatically, I think the international community has lost a lot of opportunity, in particular in the United States, and then they blame it on somebody else, which is unfortunate, and that's what it gets to our position today. Now, I understand that Prime Minister Abe, you'd like to say something.
かつて、北朝鮮の挑発的な行動によって
Back then, North Korea acted in a very threatening manner. And back in 1994, an agreement was reached upon the nuclear issue, but North Korea did not live up to its obligations assumed back then and started developing the nuclear program. In the year 2005, 6-party talks began. But unfortunately, a tentative agreement didn't turn real then. Nowadays, the international community should impose a change of policies on North Korea. With respect to the UN resolution, the international community should force North Korea to comply with that UN Security Council resolution. And thus this very difficult and complex situation should be resolved. This is my vision of the future.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in to say anything on this point? No? If not, we will go forward. Okay, now let's go to the second issue, that is Donald Trump. That's a reality. He is the President of the United States. And the title of this forum is called Creating a New Reality. I wonder if President Donald Trump might not have inadvertently helped this part of the world create a new reality. How do you see, in particular, I would address this to President Putin, how would you see the oncoming of the new administration in Washington, D.C.? How has it changed the dynamics and the relationships in Northeast Asia?
You know, you are a U.S. national, and here we have a head of state and head of government sitting that are closest allies of the United States in the region and by and large. And why have you asked me, not them?
I will ask them later.
Постараюсь ответить.
I'll try to respond, nevertheless. We see that the current U.S. administration wants to diffuse the tensions And we are aware of the fact that no one wants an aggravation. And I think that, strange as it might seem, because they have been in office not for the first months, although it's not a big timeline, a big period of time, we should watch and see how things develop. But what I want to tell you now, and I said it on many occasions, both of the leaders sitting at the podium said and confirmed that there is no other way out but for the diplomatic. It is a difficult and probably a long way of sorting things out, but it's the only correct option. We should arrive at a round of talks, sit down at a table, and convince North Korea that it is the best way forward for them as well. We should incrementally and gradually involve North Korea into the regional cooperation, and Russia has specific proposals in this respect. A road crossing the Trans-Siberian Railroad and the Korean railways via North Korea, a pipeline developing ports in North Korea, and so on and so forth. We do have something to offer. We have room for advancement and for further work. But I believe what is counterproductive is like fanning a hysteria and military atmosphere that will lead us nowhere. All those things that are happening now are provocations on the part of North Korea. This is obvious. They've been provoking and goading all others. But probably they are not so silly. Why have they been doing that? They probably want some effect, some reaction from the partners, and they arrive there. Why are you playing into their hands? Why have you been playing into their hands? This is first. Second, they will not stop at that. I said at a press conference not long ago in China after the BRICS summit, I repeat now. They know for sure how things developed in Iraq, when with the pretext and margin that was, now it's obvious, that was contrived of looking for the weapons of mass destruction, the country was destroyed, and all the leadership and family members and children were shot dead. And they know that, they remember that, and they believe that having and wielding missiles and nuclear weapons the only way out for them. Will they drop that? Will they abandon that? We will pursue the path of cooperation. This is what the message for them should be. We should tell them that we are ready to provide them a context that would be admissible for them. If we go along this path, gradually, by and by, things in the region, as well as the relationship between South and North, will transform into cooperation. We could expect next steps, but you can't spook and frighten them. What is that we offer them? We will not apply sanctions, we say, and you will have better living standards, you will have more healthy foods on your table, you'll have better clothes. But next step, as they think, is the invitation to a graveyard, a cemetery, but they won't go there. One should be quite earnest in that and formidable. It takes time and professionalism. I know that the current U.S. administration has a lot of sound people that are aware that one should watch one's step, even at the executive mid-level, in Pentagon and Department of State and CIA. There are professionals that on many occasions faced with this problem, and they have been doing that for a number of years. And I hope the horse sense will prevail, and we all together in concert will be moving towards a peaceful solution of the issue. And I hope that it's going to be the final outcome. The sooner the better.
A recent American diplomat said to me recently that we should slowly turn off the supply of energy to North Korea. And I commented to him that you are not a neighbor of North Korea, but we who live in this part of the world are neighbors and have been neighbors for the last thousands of years. And people will remember if you freeze them to death That's not something that any of the country in this part of the world would like. So I don't want to dwell too much on this subject, but since at the instruction of President Putin, I have to address to the other president in case they want to say something, or the Prime Minister. If not, we will go on. President Moon, can I go to the business relationship to North Korea? And that is, you have, I believe, suggested at one time to have a northeastern supergrid, to have electricity all network in the whole of Northeast Asia. In order for South Korea to be involved in that, don't we need to go through North Korea? And how do you think that we can convince them to play with the rest of the players in this part of the world and be part of the supergrid?
우선 앞에 나눠왔던 대화를 조금만 더 이어가면 저는 푸틴.
If we pick up on the discussion that we've just listened to, and as for the settlement of the North Korean issue, we've talked about this issue with Prime Minister Abe, with President Putin, with President Trump. We've been having an exchange of opinions on this matter. As for the North Korean matter, our basic position is that we need a peaceful settlement of the issue. And I do not think that the position of other countries, such as the US, the current administration, is any different. Even if there have been some harsh statements, it was made to put an end to the actions North Korea is currently involved in. And tightening the sanctions is yet another measure to engage North Korea in a dialogue, to make them talk. As for cutting the energy supply to North Korea, after the United Nations resolution, provocations on the part of North Korea are continuing. And that is why further sanctions are currently under discussion, and the issue that has already been raised, maybe the time has come to look into that. I refer to the need for tighter sanctions. I believe that China and Russia stick to the same position. But what concrete measures are to be taken? This is something we have to discuss together. As for the smart grid for Northeast Asia, if North Korea participates in this project, it will be far easier to implement. But even without North Korea, this project can be brought into life with the participation of Russia, China, Mongolia, Japan. Certainly, it would be a good thing if North Korea participated. If it participates, then through North Korea, you could transmit energy, electricity to Japan, to South Korea. But if North Korea doesn't participate, electricity from Russia or Mongolia can go through northern parts of China and even to Japan. The latest discussions on the smart grid have focused on different alternatives and possibilities. As you are well aware, there is a similar supergrid in Europe. European countries are united, are linked together, whereas our countries are somewhat isolated. As far as the energy grids are concerned, they are all independent. And yet we've got a great supply of green electricity coming from Russia. Mongolia can also be a supplier. And it can all be a contribution to our common prosperity, whereas for Russia it is a chance to increase its exports of electricity. So following the example of the European Union, we can set up sort of a common channel, a common grid for electricity transmission. in order to ensure multilateral security. This is going to be a tool to address the North Korean issue.
Now let me turn to economics. But before I go to Russia Far East, can I first ask President Putin a question about Russia in general? Where do you see the economic role of Russia in the global economic system? Politically, obviously, Russia is one of the most important countries, member of the United Nations, permanent member of the Security Council, your technology, your weapon, you're the only Eurasia nation in the world. So politically, you're one of the most important countries in the world. But economically, what is the role of Russia in the total global system?
Мы должны обеспечить
We have to ensure the efficient use of our competitive advantages. What are these competitive advantages? First, the high level of education of our citizens, as well as good traditions of high technology development. In this particular field, we are giving some thought to developing digital technologies. We've got a special plan, a development strategy, which was endorsed this year by the government, and we're going to follow this path steadily and consistently. The future of any economy, and the Russian economy is no exception, lies within the domain of digital technologies, artificial intelligence, everything that is part of the new technological order of things. This is the path, the avenue we're going to pursue. But certainly it would be absurd not to take advantage of our current capacities, what is our competitive advantage right now, and that is the richness of our natural resources, our logistical capabilities. As you have aptly mentioned, we're a Eurasian country. Part of our territory is in Europe. A large part of our territory lies in Asia, so it is a unique opportunity to develop all of our territories. Our colleagues have spoken up here today. The president of Mongolia said that it is easier for them to access the Far Eastern ports in Russia if the conditions were in place. It would be good. As they take coal from Caucasia, 8,000 kilometers, and from Mongolia, it's just 3,000 kilometers to our ports in the Far East. And this is absolutely correct. The president of Korea has been saying almost the same thing. He said that South Korea wants to develop our infrastructure in the Russian Far East. All of this, not just that. This is not an exhaustive list. But these are some of the things we want to develop actively, and we do hope that we will take a worthy place in the future world economy.
Now let's turn to Russian Far East. I don't know why do we still call it the Russian Far East? The implication is that the world is still a Eurocentric world. I just remind everyone that trans-Pacific trade has exceeded transatlantic trade by a long shot. And the growth, economic growth of the world of the last 30, 40 years, over 50% of them actually come from this part of the world. China, of course, accounting for a big part of it, 30%. So I wonder, there's a Russian saying that if you have a boat, make sure that you name it by the right name. So should we not have a new name, perhaps, for the Russian Far East? I'll leave it to my friends from Russia to decide on that. But it seems to me that the Russian Far East is really the last frontier of human economic activities. Africa is very much in the global economic system. Latin America is very much in it. The only part that is space and the deep sea, but that's not on land. As far as land is concerned, it seems to me that the Siberia and the Russian Far East is perhaps the last frontier for mankind, for economic development. So Russia has always talked about developing. Somebody mentioned Catherine the Great. Talk about it, visited here, expanded the territory to the east. But it seems that there has never been the determination to really develop this part of the world. And President Putin, 5-6 years ago, you appointed Mr. Tutsnev, sorry for my Russian, to be the deputy prime minister of a big major country just in charge of this part of the world. So it seems to me that there is some determination finally happening, and then you organize this forum, which is very, very successful so far. So tell us, what was the rationale behind your wanting to develop Russian Far East?
Вы их уже назвали.
Well, you've named the reasons, the rationale, you've explained it. First, the unique geographical position of this region, as well as the enormous natural wealth, including the logistic capabilities. Our colleagues have already said about that. Transporting cargo through our railroads is 2 times more efficient than using ships through the Suez Canal, because the Suez Canal is too far away, and it's more reliable because there are no pirates there. Russia has been present here for quite some time, but unfortunately, it hasn't been paying much attention to developing these territories. These are vast territories. Yes, we're exploring East Siberia, and now the time has come, and we've got the capacity. We've been undergoing some difficulties, economic difficulties over the last years, the general crisis of 2008. We've managed to overcome it, but then there were some crisis phenomena due to a plunge of prices, and our export, oil export, our GDP growth even stuck at 0 for some time. We were planning a 0.7% last year. Right now, our GDP growth is 2.1%, whereas our industrial output is growing at 2.6%. The agriculture growth is 3.4%. Maybe it's going to be around 3%. We've got to look at the crops. Our inflation has been brought to a historic minimum at 3.5% as of now. Russia has never seen an inflation this low. Our gold and foreign currency reserves of the central bank are growing. Our unemployment is also at a record low, less than 5%. So the macroeconomic conditions are there to ensure the growth of our economy, as well as the growth of such an important part of our country as the Russian Far East. Our trade, and I've mentioned that, is growing. If we subtract oil and gas, the trade growth is 25%, which is quite impressive. Over these years, even amid the crisis, the Russian Far East has been growing at an accelerated pace. The general growth of industrial output was 2.6%, but in the Russian Far East, it stands at 6%, more than 5%. So that means that if we concentrate financial, administrative resources, if we use the regulatory resources, and if we improve the environment, if we pay attention to business in general and to investors in particular. Incidentally, investment into the Russian economy is growing at more than 4%, at an accelerated pace, that is. So if we do all of that, if we pull the resources together, this region can grow at a very high pace. And this is going to ensure the contribution towards the future of Russia. And as I have said, we're going to pay more attention to this region.
Am I correct, President Putin, that the population here is only about, 4.4% of the entire country? But the GDP contribution, I believe, is something like 5.6%. So there is, on average, people who are living here actually do better than the rest of the country. So I suppose that number should increase, and both in terms of population and in terms of GDP.
Правильно, вы абсолютно правы.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And this is something we should give the credit for to those who live here. This is also the government to be credited with that over the recent years. Investment into this region has to be tantamount to the contribution the region makes to the development of the Russian economy. And we've charted the course, further steps to give more attention from the government to this region. But apart from everything, as you've said yourself, the Far East is part of a very fast developing region. Let's take the example of Japan. It's a high-tech based country. South Korea, China is growing at a very high pace. India as well. Just recently, I've been speaking about the logistical capabilities. We've had some pilot projects, tests of container movement from India, from south to north through Iran, through Azerbaijan to the port of St. Petersburg, from India, all the way from India. And this is just the first step. West-east is yet another corridor to explore, and there are other capabilities. So given these circumstances, given the Far East being part of a very dynamic region, we've got to integrate it into this system to make it attractive from our partners from this region in particular, but not just that.
Obviously, infrastructure is something that is still somewhat lacking in this part of the world, and infrastructure takes a lot of money. So the fact that, Mr. Putin, you organize this forum tells me that you welcome international participation, and you said it as well. So may I now turn to our friend from Japan and our friend from Korea, and then later I'll go to Mongolia with this very specific question. First, Abe-san, what are you doing to encourage your companies to come to this part of the world? Are they coming? Are the Japanese companies coming big time to this part of the world?
先ほどこの極東という話がありましたが、確かに、
Well, we've been speaking about the Russian Far East, the Far East. If you look at the map of Russia, you'll see that the Far East is the Russian Far East. Vladivostok is a city facing the sea, and through sea, it's linked to the whole world, the city. Vladivostok has access to the Asia-Pacific. This is a city open for the whole of the Asia-Pacific. It can also turn into a source of development, kind of a gateway. As for a plan for cooperation, we've got many avenues to pursue, but one of these avenues is an emphasis on the industrial development of the Far East, so that the Russian Far East becomes sort of a center of export to the whole world, to the rest of the world. Indeed, this was one of my ideas, I think, and representatives of the Japanese companies, they do concur with my vision. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with the leadership and the representatives of Japanese companies, and to tell you the truth, many Japanese companies, including the leading ones, either have entered the region or are going to do that, both large enterprises and small and medium enterprises.
So how are investments developing at the moment? How are these companies working now in the Far East? The heads of those companies informed me yesterday. For example, the Ruski Island, where we are located right now, the thing is that power supply to these islands is produced using the Japanese technology. Last year, together with President Putin, we visited the oceanarium, and the oceanarium itself and its equipment, all this has been produced by Japanese companies, so Japanese companies do see the real business opportunities here in the Far East. Energy. This is a traditional area for cooperation between Russia and Japan, but as concerns renewable energy sources such as wind power generation, this is the area where the Japanese companies are being quite active. For example, in winter it's quite cold here in the Far East, and for example, Japanese companies are growing vegetables in greenhouses, and the people of the Far East, even in winter, can enjoy fresh vegetables, eco-clean, eco-friendly green vegetables. In Irkutsk, in Yakutia, we've already begun the job, so advanced Japanese technologies are already used in this sphere. In Yakutia, for example, I've already spoken about plans of cooperation on all areas that I offered to President Putin last year. healthcare and medicine, we're already cooperating actively on that to make sure that the life expectancy of Russian people increases. So Japan promotes this technology very actively to foreign countries, including Russia. This is a much promising area of cooperation. There are other areas as well. Such a platform as the Eastern Economic Forum provides us with a good opportunity to inform the wide audience on how businesses are developing, what opportunities exist, and I believe that would be a great incentive for future investments by Japanese companies into Russia and into this region. And to make sure we unlock all the existing possibilities, we do need to support our strong will. Thank you.
Are there specific policies that you would like to see in Russia that will encourage further investment from Japan or from Korea? Would you care to address any of that? Or are you very happy now with the existing situation and the Korean companies, the Japanese companies are coming big time?
한국은 아시는 바와 같이 반도 국가입니다.
As you know quite well, Korea is a peninsular state, and the geopolitical advantages of our state are the connection existing between the mainland and the ocean. Unfortunately, recently, due to the unsolved inter-Korean issue, we do not have access to the continent. This road is closed for us. And active involvement in the development of the Far East gives us an opportunity to gain access to the continent, to the mainland, to join these two parts. These are the prospects that we are seeking. Russian Far East is a region where different Korean companies are operating in agriculture, logistics, fisheries, shipbuilding. And this emphasizes the huge prospects that this region has. But as of now, our companies are not as active as we would like them to be. Probably the investment climate is not yet well known to investors, and they see some risks here. And to improve the investment climate, to set up an environment for successful business activities, we should use this opportunity of pulling our financial resources together. We, on our behalf, established a Northern Committee for Economic Cooperation. Together with Russia, we set up a new financial platform So we built this financial platform in the amount of $2 billion for joint investment into projects here in the Far East. Besides, we will also establish a center to stimulate investment into Far Eastern projects. We would also like to sign a free trade agreement with the Eurasian Economic Union. This will help boost trade contacts between our country and this region. Yesterday, we discussed it with Mr. President Putin. We decided to set up a working group to look into this question. And it is our hope that this working group will speed up its work, and as a result, a free trade agreement would be concluded. Just recently, upon the initiative of Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Trutnev, the Day of the Korean Investor was created. This is an event which provides an opportunity to discuss all the difficulties that Korean investors are faced with, and this allows for better access of investment into the Russian forest.
President Moon, you must be happy to know that I'm staying at Hotel Hyundai, and the car that drives me around is Hyundai as well. So I can see that the Koreans are very active here, and there's so many fellow friends from South Korea. That's wonderful. President Batuga, can I ask you regarding your country's relationship to this part of the world? President Batuga, your country is very rich in natural resources, but so is Russian Far East. Basically, what you have is what Russian Far East has here. They have what you have what they have, perhaps minus the oil, but minerals, iron ore, copper, many things. Unlike Japan and Korea, where they have what Russian Far East doesn't have, and they also need what Russian Far East can give them. The relationship between Mongolia and Russian Far East is different. Should you not develop as soon as you can, as fast as you can, such that you don't want to let a big guy finish developing and then you may be left in a difficult position? What are you doing to quickly develop the the Mongolian economy?
Thank you.
Баялагтай гэж хэлж байна. Та манай Монгол улсын баялаг бол харамсалтай нь далайд гарцгүй учраас.
Although Mongolia is rich in natural resources, unfortunately, we lack access. We are a landlocked country, and we cannot sell our products. And as the president of Mongolia, I take part in this forum in order to promote our products, to sell our products through transportation. And it is in this context that I met with the Prime Minister of Japan, and I came up with a proposal that we could give our private companies, Russian and Mongolian and Japanese companies, we could give them an opportunity to begin the use of a joint port where we could purify the coal and prepare it to be exported. I do agree that we live in the world, we live in the Europe-centered world, but it's not the way it used to be. Europe is not the way it used to be. And Asia-Pacific region is earning its place in the world. Although New Zealand is a quite remote country, it enjoys advanced agriculture, and therefore New Zealand can export its products all over the world. Being a part of this region, we cannot remain inactive. This is my main idea. We need to find access to the sea using our northern neighbor, Russia, and we should be equal partners with all the other regional stakeholders. I see a lot of people here participating in this forum, people with really busy schedule. It's the first time I take part in the forum, and I was able to see with my own eyes that this is an ice-free port here, and it is my conviction that in the future we will be able to begin developing our cooperation. Recently we've discussed the issue of North Korea. I'm confident there will be no war on the Korean Peninsula. I've visited North Korea several times, 6 or 7 times, as Minister of Agriculture, in the capacity of the Minister of Agriculture. I'm sure that no sanctions will be able to stop diplomatic contacts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Indeed, you are landlocked, but that is since time immemorial. Just like I'm born a short, ugly guy, there's nothing I can do about it. I can just turn it into something that will work. With Mongolia, you have 2 friends, one in the north with Russia, one in the south with China. You have good relationship with Russia. You're sitting next to the president. I assume you have fairly good relationship with China as well. So you can have 2, northern route, southern route, or to the ocean. Not to mention that the biggest consumer of your products in the world in the last 25 years is right next to you, and that's China, and they don't have it. They don't have what you have. And so it seems to me that you are in a very, very good position to thrive in the coming years. And with the president not just being a judo black belt and a World Cup champion, but also a business person, I'm sure that your country will do very, very well under your leadership, and I wish you all the best. Now let me turn to the matter of capital. We need capital to develop these huge infrastructure projects. It seems to me that everything I've heard here in the last 2 days is financial capital. It is not corporate capital. Maybe 80%, 90% I hear are financial capital. These are money that does not come with management, experience, technology. It is just money. I always tell people that this dollar is not the same as that dollar. Sorry, I don't have rupees here. I only have US dollars. This US dollar is different from this US dollar because this US dollar is nothing but $1. This $1 comes with it management, comes with it technology, comes with it experience. And it seems to me that in order to develop this part of the world, of course we need the financial capital, but so much the more if we are able to attract the corporate capital, companies with experience, with technology. Moreover, they are the ones that create jobs. The financial capital still need to hire somebody to provide that aspect, but the corporate capital can set up operation here, create a lot of jobs. So what is Russia doing in order to attract not just the financial capital? And you have your own, you have RDIF, you have Far East Development Fund and so forth, and of course you have other sources of money, AIIB and the like. But how do you attract businesses to set up operation here that can create jobs?
I've already spoken about it in my presentation, but let me repeat some key aspects. Of course, we create and will continue creating favorable business conditions from the point of view of administrative procedures, facilitation of customs procedures, the possibilities of business trips here. By the way, let me remind you that we have introduced visa-free regime for the port of Vladivostok for those people who want to work here. The advanced development territories, which I mentioned, we've set up 17 of them. They provide a whole set of benefits, of preferences, tax breaks at different levels of the tax system. I've just announced additional preferences in this area. We are going to provide not just these conditions, but we will also try to make sure life here interesting for locals and for those who come here. It is important that we're planning to build a cultural cluster here. You've mentioned the Mariinsky Theater. I am grateful to Maestro Gergiev for carrying out this work here. We have a branch of Mariinsky Theater working here. We're also going to establish the branch of Hermitage, Tretyakov Gallery, and Russian Museum. It is important for people to live in a favorable environment, in an interesting environment. And besides, what's important is that the options of cooperation that we come forward with, that they were interesting. Several years ago, we established a new Russian space launch center. First missiles were launched from this space launch center. And in the next few years, we will make sure that this is the first large-scale civil space launch center, which we will be using to explore the far outer space. We will carry out piloted flights. We're going to cooperate with the United States in this sphere as well. Well, unless there is some, unless we have some problems with other US guys, there is a joint interest in this work together with American partners in studying Mars. We will continue our work on energy. This is a very important area, and all those present here are extremely interested in this work. Finally, shipbuilding. It's important. We're developing shipbuilding. And my colleague sitting on my right, President of Korea, mentioned that we are not just placing orders. This is a good business. 15 ice-class vessels. But together with South Korean friends, we are building a new facility. We're building this Zvezda plant in the Far East. This is the plant which I'm going to visit tomorrow, by the way. This is a very specialized area of cooperation. These maintenance and supply vessels, these are drilling platforms. This is what we need, and this is what our partners need. And it's something that does not have to do with competitive struggle. The synergy of our efforts will provide good results for everyone, because it is in everyone's interest to obtain these energy resources. So this is a high-tech sphere. I mean, shipbuilding is a high-tech sphere. We are developing aviation here, by the way. And it's not just military aviation, combat aviation, which is renowned all over the world. Su aircraft, Su-135 aircraft, which are used efficiently against terrorists in Syria, they're produced here in the Far East. And this is also where we produced our cutting-edge civil aircraft, Superjet 100, which is sold quite well at international markets in Asia. First of all, we will follow on that effort. Education. We're present here at the Federal University, at the Far East Federal University. It also enjoys its competitive advantages, which have to do with the unique location of this region. People have an opportunity to work in such spheres as outer space, energy, shipbuilding, aviation. There is all the necessary foundation for this. The marine biology. We will develop this area in the Russian Academy of Sciences. All this in its totality, to my mind, should create, and I'm deeply convinced that this will be the case, this should create good conditions for cooperation. Prime Minister of Japan mentioned that they had a special ministry in the government of Japan responsible for cooperation with Russia. Yesterday, at my meeting with Chinese friends, I said to the Vice Premier of the Chinese government, is he present here, by the way? Yes, I can see him. Yes, I said that I signed a decree on awarding him with an Order of Friendship, and this is not a mere coincidence. This is not any coincidence. For the last 2 years, the investment in this region, foreign investment in the ruble equivalent, totaled to 450 billion rubles. That's about $9 billion US. 80% of that investment came from Chinese friends. Therefore, I urge Prime Minister Abe, maybe we should promote the minister who is responsible for cooperation with Russia. Maybe you should promote him to the post of vice or deputy prime minister so that he could have more administrative resources to engage and to involve Japanese companies in cooperation with Russia. I would also like to ask President of Korea and of Mongolia for them to find an opportunity to find some people, to appoint some people for developing our cooperation. And by the way, I haven't mentioned agriculture. This is a very important sphere for the Russian Far East. Prime Minister Abe mentioned it. We have a huge number of cultivation lands in the Far East. These lands should be used and must be used in the interest of the whole region. Some of our partners, including Vietnamese friends, they already have set up their agricultural production in the region, beside what our Japanese colleagues are doing here. As concerns awards and orders, you should bear in mind this is not the last award that we have. We still have some left. But to your compatriot, Mr. Tillerson, we also at some point awarded him with an order of friendship, but it looks like he, well, messed with the wrong guys, and probably he is moving in some wrong direction, but we hope that the wind of cooperation, of friendship, will set him to the right course eventually. And by the way, this is also a factor of business environment. Despite all the difficulties that we have in the diplomatic arena, we do maintain contacts with U.S. companies, including with the biggest energy company, ExxonMobil company, which was headed by Mr. Tillerson. Despite the fact that he is searching our diplomatic properties right now and carrying out these searches, we solve this crisis with his ex-company, with ExxonMobil company. There are some specific issues which ExxonMobil is interested in resolving in order to work in the Far East on Sakhalin 1, which is our biggest project. And even against the backdrop of these diplomatic scandals, we have agreed with them how to solve this problem, taking their interest into account, and the Russian government is going to announce that in the near future. As I believe all this creates a general favorable picture and environment for the development of business activities in the Russian Far East.
It seems to me that so much capital is necessary in this part of the world that eventually this part of the world has to tap the international capital market, such as those in London, in New York, and in Hong Kong. But until there are enough successful projects...
Excuse me, смотрите, вы правы.
Well, look, you're absolutely... I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we already have here in Russia about 300 or 270 companies working here, Japanese companies working here, to say nothing of the Chinese companies, 600 companies from the Republic of Korea. We enjoy a special relationship with Mongolia in economy. Mongolia has we have big joint ventures. We have a common railroad, something we inherited from the Soviet Union. So we are satisfied with how our contacts are developing, but we believe that this is not enough and this does not meet our potential.
Mr. President, allow me to speak to you as a business person. There are some parts of the world at different times that catches the attention of the world. It sparks the imagination. I wish that this part of the world will one day spark the imagination of the international business community. You mentioned that a lot is already here. Congratulations. But you also mentioned that more should become in order to, you want more in order to arrive at the potential. In order to do that, is it a possibility, along the line of what President Moon has just mentioned, that a major infrastructure project participated by many countries, of course led by Russia, but Japan, Mongolia, Korea, that's ROK, and China, and perhaps some others, that can be a project-based company, a consortium that can do some of the really amazing projects in this part of the world such that it will spark the imagination of the world in order to really attract attention to here.
Именно к этому все мы и должны стремиться.
This is exactly what we all should strive for. President of Korea mentioned one of such possible projects. This is the energy grid, regional energy grid, which is a large-scale, powerful project which will and which might affect all countries: Russia, China, South Korea, Japan. Given the growing demand of the region for energy supply, this is something that could be a driving engine. Second, we've been talking with our Chinese partners, Chinese friends, about interlinking the proposal of President Xi Jinping on the Silk Road and the Eurasian Economic Union. This is something that should be interlinked. There are no contradictions here, and on this basis, we could build a greater space of Eurasian cooperation. This would involve developing infrastructure, high-tech projects, joint projects. Bear in mind all the technological achievements of Japan and South Korea and Mongolia's capabilities. These could be very interesting large-scale projects, not just energy projects. And we are already implementing the Yamal LNG project, where several companies are involved. European companies, by the way, and Asian companies as well, Indian companies. Sakhalin 1 and Sakhalin 2, we are going to develop those cooperation. We invite you to cooperate with us together in outer space. Despite all the existing problems, despite everything our US partners say, they're still using our rocket engines. They do not refuse from using these engines. They can't afford it right now. There is nothing more competitive than Russia-produced rocket engines. We are ready to develop a relationship with all the countries of the Asia-Pacific, and it is my hope that this will be the case.
Gentlemen, everything I heard today is bilateral. It's between Russia and Korea, Russia and Mongolia, Russia and Japan, Russia and China. Is there room, do you think, if I may be allowed to ask Abe-san first perhaps, is there room for multilateral cooperation in this part of the world on some big infrastructure project that hopefully will spark the imagination of the world? Are there room for multilateral cooperation instead of just bilateral?
We already mentioned one of them. This is this big energy circle which permits many countries in the region, bringing them together into a joint effort. Speaking about Korea, the tripartisan project, very much encouraging thing. If we could only come to terms with the North Korea and the Republic of Korea together and join the Korean railway road, the Trans-Siberian Railway in Russia, we are planning to build a bridge to Sakhalin, and after that connect Sakhalin and the island of Hokkaido. You see, this is an absolutely planetary scale thing which may lead to certain very significant changes in the infrastructure, in energy, and in the high-tech area. Now, isn't what the Prime Minister of Japan told us about our joint project in healthcare, doesn't it take the imagination of the world? Yes, it does. And we would be very happily inviting partners from any global area to come over here and join us in this effort.
Speaking as a person from Hong Kong, I do welcome your project to be listed in Hong Kong. I think they will be the closest international capital market that you can tap. It will be a wonderful thing. With the remaining time, allow me to turn to something else. I operate in 18 countries around the world. I collaborate with many friends from Europe, South Africa, America, and so forth, and rest of Asia on projects. A lot of people tell me that it is very difficult to get things done in Russia. Why do you think is the case, and what can be done to improve that situation?
Для этого мы регулярно встречаемся.
For this, we hold regular meetings with the kind of people who already are doing business in Russia. And I suggest that you should talk to these kind of people who are able to do tangible business in the kind of operations they do in the Russian market. There are quite a lot of them. Yesterday, I met with the representatives of the companies which operate in Russia, including the Russian Far East. And these are the companies representing almost 60 countries. Yesterday, they were talking about the problems that they encounter. And, you know, I noted to myself with satisfaction that, firstly, there is nothing which would be running counter to the efforts we undertake to improve the business environment. But there are certain issues which are natural. For example, insufficiently developed infrastructure. This is clearly what we see in our partners to my left and to my right. Together with us, they're ready to develop this infrastructure. If it wasn't for the case, you know, we haven't had a developed infrastructure, which is a bit of a legacy, because Vladivostok used to be, historically for Russia, a fortress and a military settlement. I mean, it didn't have a normal kind of an airport facility, but step by step we're going to change that. And one should also improve, of course, legal regulation, and I made a lot of references to it, including in my introductory word. One should make funding available. For that purpose, respective financial institutions are being set up, and institutions together with our direct investment fund. And along with the Korean and Japanese partners, together with Korean partners, we set up 2 funds like that. And so we need to direct them to the proper projects. We should step away in every way possible from politically motivated restrictions, because that is detrimental to everyone. And we certainly should provide for direct access for those who want to cooperate, to reach each other. We should avoid all kinds of visa restrictions and eliminate them. And this is something that I also mentioned, because for Vladivostok, for the port, we introduced this visa-free entrance. So work should be done, but this work should be going into different directions. Our businessmen do encounter certain restrictions as well whenever they try and operate in the markets of our neighbors. And yesterday, meeting with the Russian businesses who participated in our meeting, represented by the heads of the Russian Far Eastern regions, we also heard this a little bit of a grievance, so there has to be a two-way street. Now, with this in mind, we would certainly be supporting regional preferential treaties and agreements, but the kind which do not contradict the principles and the norms of the World Trade Organization, which, within the framework of such rules, create additional terms and incentives for countries and people to work together.
Am I correct, Mr. President, that you wrote a thesis one time on trade? Am I correct? You wrote a thesis on free trade.
No, my thesis I wrote about the resource base, about the commodity resources. That was my thesis, citing the example of the renewable aspect of the Leningrad resource base back in the days when I worked in St. Petersburg city administration. But about how this work should be planned, but it really is not different from the work done in any region. But I do say that that past experience of mine, joined together with what I see taking place in the real life, would definitely be helping, and has been helping and still helping me in my job.
With the remaining time we have already been here.
Excuse me, речь шла о стратегическом планировании.
But you were talking about the strategic planning. I mean, that was about the strategic planning aspects so as to make the resource base in any particular region renewable and sustainable.
Yeah. Time is almost up, so let me just wrap up. Can I ask whoever of you would like to answer this question, in particular, again, our host, since you are the host, so I have to direct the question to you perhaps more than anyone else. What economic legacy would you like to leave behind? President Putin, when you are 85, I will ask them later, when you're 85, still a long way off. When your grandchildren or great-grandchildren come to you and say, Grandpa, what did you do for my country in economics? What would you say? The same thing I would like to ask of the others. President Batoga from Mongolia, President Moon, and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. President Moon, what kind of legacy would you leave in the economic field? What would you tell your grandchildren one day? You have done this for your country.
저는 한국의 철도가 북한
Oh, yes.
시베리아 철도로
I would like the Korean Railroad passing through North Korea to connect to Trans-Siberian Railway, and for the train which would leave Busan could help one travel all the way to Europe, and so that the Russian gas through the North Korea, through the gas pipeline passing through North Korea, could reach consumers in my country. That is the kind of vision of the future I would like to have. Like, for example, in Europe, there is an economic community. Likewise, in other regions, there are economic formats of cooperation. And similarly, in the Northeastern Asia, I would like to see a system of multilateral cooperation develop. Exactly like I noted in my introductory speech, I think that through the energy cooperation in the form of electric circle, power circle, energy circle, that would help us expand our cooperation into other sectors, which would involve Northeastern region and the whole of Asia for the sake of our prosperity. And during my tenure as a president, I would like to start these projects. And on my part, I would very much like for the Russian economy, generally speaking, in the Far East specifically, to be a contemporary, a flexible kind which automatically could adjust to fast-paced changes in the world, for it to fit as easily as possible into the next technological era, for it to be managed by contemporary and modern means, and effectively with that, for all of it to assist the development of our cooperation, both with other countries as well as with the Asia-Pacific countries, so that this altogether would create conditions for a sound, reliable and stable peace and cooperation.
President Batuga, what is your economic vision for your country? What legacy would you like to leave?
Би сонгуулийн өмнө бол орохдоо их зөрөгтэй орсон. Яагаад гэвэл надад Монгол улсыг хөгжүүлэх.
During the election campaign, I announced my program of the development of our state. Mongolia will become a farming nation with the ultimate objective to export its mining commodities as well, and that is our purpose to participate in this forum.
Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, besides that question, I have another one for you, and that is, I heard you took a train here.
経済を成長させるのは人です。人材です。まさに誰もがどんな家庭に育ってもですね、高等教育を受けれる、そういう日本にしていきたいとこう思っております。そして同時に
Any human being, irrespective of the kind of family that gave him birth, could gain higher education in Japan, and many people live there in Japan for more than 100 years. And I would like to see my society turn into the kind of society where you can start a new life, not just once, so that all the citizens could achieve their lives' goals and objectives, develop themselves, and become happy. And this is the kind of economy that I would like to leave behind in my country.
Do you think, Mr. Abe, that one day you'll be able to take a train from Tokyo to Vladivostok? Is that a possibility? What do you think about the idea?
東京からウラジオストックにですね、列車で行けたらどんなに便利だろうと思いますし、それぞれの都市
In Vladivostok, it really would be great if one could travel by train. But in order to do that, one must strengthen mutual trust between our countries, and so as to make all of the projects feasible and implementable. So let's put all of our heads together in order to do such a project.
Can I end by just one sentence, Mr. President Putin? Would it be right to say that among other legacy that you will leave to your grandchildren or great-grandchildren, you will be able to tell them that whereas generations of Russian leaders have always wanted to develop Russian Far East, it was your grandfather or great-grandfather, as the case may be, who has turned not just Vladivostok, but the entire Russian Far East and make it bloom. Population would have increased, not one time, but 3 times, 5 times. It will be integrated fully into not just the rest of Russia, but also integrated into the entire Northeast Asia, such that your influence will no longer just be in Europe, but also as much in Asia, not just politically, but also economically. Would that be something that is part of your dream?
Это и есть
This is exactly the kind of an objective that myself and all of us who work in Russia to develop the Far East, this is exactly the kind of vision that we're trying to attain. I am confident that many things, at least quite many things, out of what we dream of will come true.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Russian Far East, so Russia must take the lead, and I'm sure that all the countries surrounding, from Mongolia, Japan, Korea, China, and even others, will be very, very happy to take part in developing good economic relationship for the benefit of all. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we put our hands together to thank the 4 leaders?
Мы хотим сказать спасибо нашему модератору.
And we would like to thank our moderator. Thank you very much indeed.